The ground beneath your feet is running dry. I know, that sounds like the start of a disaster movie, but here's the deal. The minerals that power your phone, your car, and your entire digital existence are quietly moving to a place where no human can breathe. We've been told for a decade that a green revolution is coming, an era of infinite electric vehicles and clean energy. But there's a brutal reality that the glossy brochures don't mention. Our land-based mines are dying. We've hit what geologists call the yield wall, and it's about to get very expensive for all of us. Look at the data. Terrestrial copper ore grades have plummeted to an average of just 0.59%. That's a tiny fraction of what we were pulling out of the ground 50 years ago. Today, mining companies have to process 3 times more rock just to get the same amount of metal. 3 times the energy, 3 times the water, and 3 times the waste. The math simply stops working. And when the math stops working, economists start sweating. We're digging deeper and deeper, but the energy it takes to reach those minerals is starting to cost more than the minerals themselves. It's a race to the bottom, and we're losing.
So where do we go when the land runs out? We go down. Way down. 4 kilometers beneath the waves, in a place called the Clarion-Clipperton zone. It's a vast, silent stretch of the Pacific Ocean, and it holds a secret that's currently worth about $31 billion. But what if I told you the solution to our energy crisis isn't on land at all?
What if the future of your bank account is sitting on the floor of the deep abyss, waiting for someone to pick it up? Let that sink in. Because while you've been sleeping, a new gold rush has begun, and the rules of the game are being written in the dark. Okay, let's talk about the real problem. Why are we even looking at the bottom of the ocean? It sounds like science fiction, right? But here's where the story takes a turn. On land, a good cobalt mine might give you a 1 or 2% yield. You're basically sifted through mountains of dirt for a handful of treasure. But on the ocean floor, nature has done the work for us. There are these things called polymetallic nodules. Think of them as batteries in a rock. They're potato-sized lumps of pure mineral wealth sitting right there on top of the silt. The density is staggering. We're talking about 21 billion tons of these nodules in the CCZ alone. And the purity? It's wild. We're looking at 99% usable minerals, cobalt, nickel, manganese, compared to that pathetic 1% we find on land. It's a mineral buffet. Why would you spend billions picking through 100 tons of dirt on land when you can just vacuum up pure metal from the seabed? This is what we call the purity gap, and it's the ultimate deflationary force for our future energy grid. If we can get these rocks, the cost of batteries could drop through the floor. I know, sounds like a win-win. Lower prices for your next EV, cheaper electronics, a cleaner planet. But here's the part I find wild. Even though this resource is sitting in international waters, the world's largest superpower is currently legally locked out of the treasure map. While companies like the Metals Company, or TMC, are seeing their valuations swing by 140%, the United States is standing on the sidelines. Why? Because the US never ratified the UN treaty that governs the seafloor. It's like a massive game of Monopoly where the wealthiest player isn't allowed to buy any property. This isn't just a technical challenge, it's an economic pivot. We are moving from an era of extraction to an era of collection. But who gets to collect? Right now, the International Seabed Authority is the gatekeeper. They've issued 31 exploration licenses, and this is where it gets strange. While the West is busy arguing over environmental impact studies, other players are moving in. They see the nodules for what they really are, the most important strategic asset of the 21st century. If you control the nodules, you control the price of life. And trust me, some people are very, very good at playing this game. So who's actually winning? Let's talk about the flag of convenience strategy. This is the part nobody's talking about. Because the US is out of the game, private companies and state-owned enterprises are getting creative. Take China. They already control 77% of global cobalt refining. They've spent the last decade consolidating assets in places like the DRC, but they know landmines are a headache. So they've secured 5 out of the 31 exploration contracts at the bottom of the sea. That's more than any other single nation. But wait, it gets better. Small island nations like Nauru have triggered what's known as the 2-year rule. Basically, they told the UN, either you finalize the mining code in 2 years, or we start mining under whatever rules exist. It was a legal grenade, and it worked. This move was backed by the Metals Company, a Canadian firm that's using Nauru's sovereign rights to bypass the usual bureaucratic gridlock. It's a brilliant, if slightly murky, geopolitical maneuver.
While the world's diplomats were drinking coffee in Kingston, Jamaica, the map of the deep sea was being carved up.
This is a geopolitical weaponization of the high seas. If China and a few small partners lock down the most mineral-rich parts of the CCZ, they don't just win a business contract, they win the ability to dictate global inflation. Think about that. Every time you buy a phone or a laptop, a portion of that price is determined by the cost of the raw materials inside. If one group controls the abyssal source, they can turn the tap on or off whenever they want. They can make your middle-class savings evaporate just by raising the price of the grid. And honestly, this is the most interesting part of the whole story. Is this just a race for minerals? Or are we witnessing the cover story for a new kind of undersea Cold War? Think about it. When you're deploying massive robotic harvesters and laying thousands of miles of cable, you're not just mining, you're building a surveillance network. You're mapping the deep in ways the military has only dreamed of. The line between commercial mining and national security is starting to blur, and the stakes couldn't be higher. We're not just talking about rocks, we're talking about the new frontier of global power. Now, if this all sounds a little familiar, that's because we've seen this movie before. Let's zoom out for a second. Go back to 1974. A billionaire named Howard Hughes builds a massive ship called the Glomar Explorer. He tells the world he's going to mine the deep sea for manganese nodules. Sound familiar? Well, it was a lie, a total fabrication. The whole deep sea mining project was actually a CIA cover story called Project Azorian. The real mission? To recover a sunken Soviet submarine, the K-29, from the bottom of the Pacific. In 1974, mining was the lie. In 2026, mining is the reality, but the security cover feels eerily similar. Today, we have voices like French President Emmanuel Macron calling for a total ban on deep-sea mining. He warns of an ecological black swan, an irreversible disaster that could destroy the heart of our planet's carbon sequestration system. On the other side, you have CEOs like Gerard Barron arguing that these nodules are the only ethical path to net zero. He says they have 90% less CO2 impact than landmines. Who do you trust? It's a fascinating divide. On one hand, you have the oceanographers, like Dr. Sylvia Earle, who warn that disturbing the abyssal plains could trigger a climate feedback loop that no amount of mineral wealth can fix. On the other, you have Goldman Sachs calling this the ultimate deflationary force. It's a classic battle, the environment versus the economy, but here's the kicker, even if we don't mine, the race is already changing things. The mere possibility of deep-sea minerals has caused cobalt prices to crash by over 60% from their peaks. The market is already reacting to the ghost of the abyss. So we're left with a question that goes beyond spreadsheets. Are we repeating the mistakes of the past, just in deeper water? We've stripped the land, and now we're looking at the one place on Earth we haven't touched. If we trigger a feedback loop 4 kilometers down, we won't see it coming until it's too late. But if we don't mine, we might find ourselves in a world where only the incredibly wealthy can afford the technology that was supposed to save us all. It's a gamble of planetary proportions, and the house always wins. So what does this actually mean for you? Why should you care about a bunch of rocks in the middle of the Pacific? Because this $31 billion race is the final destination for your wallet. The US government just tripled the funding for strategic mineral reserves, pouring $2.1 billion into the effort. They know that if they lose the abyssal source, they lose control over the cost of living. Your daily inflation is directly tied to who wins this race. If the supply chain for batteries remains a monopoly, your savings are effectively being drafted into someone else's war. Think about that next time you see the price of a new car or your electricity bill. The minerals powering your future are no longer a land-based certainty, they are a deep-sea gamble. Control of these nodules allows nations to dictate global prices, effectively deciding if your middle-class life will grow or if it will slowly evaporate under the weight of resource scarcity. The gold rush is over, and the era of the abyss has begun. The real question isn't how much wealth we'll find at the bottom of the ocean, it's who will own the air we breathe and the prices we pay once the rush is over. What do you think is the risk worth the reward?